Power corrupts, yet absolute power breeds monsters. In the blood-drenched arena of ancient Rome, one man convinced himself he was emperor and god, gladiator and divinity all at once. His name was Commodus, and his rule would twist the mightiest empire the world had ever known into a grotesque theater of insanity, where citizens were compelled to worship a megalomaniac draped in Hercules' lion's skin while the city burned around him. This is the tale of how a philosopher's son became the most hated ruler Rome ever endured, and how his fantasies of godhood dragged him to a brutal death in his own bath. The tragedy of Commodus lays bare the blackest depths of human nature when limitless power collides with a crumbling mind. His story is not simply one of political collapse, but of a psychological spiral that still stands as history's sharpest warning against unchecked autocracy. From the gleaming marble corridors of the imperial palace to the gore-soaked sand of the Colosseum, we will follow a prince raised to guide an empire who instead chose to tear it apart chasing his warped dream of divinity. In the 2nd century AD, Rome stood at the dazzling summit of its strength and sophistication. The era of the 5 good emperors had delivered an almost miraculous age of peace, wealth, and expansion. The last and greatest of them was Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king whose meditations would shape Western thought for 2,000 years. Yet even this wisest of men made one fatal mistake that would curse his legacy. He broke centuries of tradition and passed the throne to his own flesh-and-blood son instead of the best men he could adopt. In 161 AD, Commodus Lucius Aelius Aurelius was born into privilege beyond imagination. As Marcus Aurelius' heir, he was fated from the cradle to command 50 million souls across 3 continents. The empire of his childhood stretched from the misty shores of Britain to the Euphrates, from the Rhine to the burning sands of the Sahara. Trade roads bound far-flung provinces together, Roman law ruled countless nations, Roman legions enforced the Pax Romana that had brought the known world its longest stretch of calm. But beneath that golden surface, cracks were already forming. Barbarian tribes hammered at the northern borders. Endless wars drained the treasury. The old Roman virtues that had forged the empire were quietly fading. The stage was ready either for rebirth or ruin, everything hung on the next emperor's character. Tragically, that emperor would be a young man obsessed with personal fame rather than duty, intoxicated by bloodshed in the arena rather than the burdens of rule. Marcus Aurelius spent much of Commodus' boyhood on the Danube frontier, locked in the grinding Marcomannic wars against Germanic hordes. The young prince rode with his father and saw war, death, and chaos up close. Some scholars believe those early sights of slaughter planted the seeds of his later addiction to violence and spectacle. While his father pondered the meaning of leadership and mortality, the boy thrilled to the raw rush of conquest and domination. Roman imperial power looked absolute, but it actually rested on a fragile cooperation between emperor, senate, army, and people. The best rulers had respected that balance. Commodus never grasped it. His reign would be defined by suspicion, extravagance, and a sick hunger for worship that would finally destroy him. When Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD on the Danube front, his 18-year-old son inherited not only a throne but the hard-won wisdom of centuries. The handover was peaceful, the legions and senate had already accepted Commodus as co-emperor. At first, many hoped the young man might blend his father's philosophy with practical rule. Those hopes died quickly. Commodus' very first decision as sole ruler exposed his true priorities. Instead of finishing the campaigns that were about to secure the northern frontier, he rushed a sloppy peace with the barbarians and raced back to Rome. The soldiers cheered an end to war, but the threat was only delayed. Later emperors would pay in blood for his impatience. Once home, Commodus shed every pretense of republican tradition and embraced naked autocracy. He fired capable advisors, ignored the Senate, and packed the court with flatterers who fed his swelling ego. The palace, once a place of serious government, turned into a circus of luxury and fear. His behavior grew stranger by the month. He demanded theatrical rituals of submission, insisted on godlike titles, and began hunting imaginary traitors. Senators who had served loyally under Marcus Aurelius suddenly found their lives in danger. The delicate system that had kept Rome stable for generations was deliberately smashed by a ruler who saw plots in every corner. Nothing revealed Commodus more clearly than his fixation on the gladiatorial games. Earlier emperors had used the arena to win popularity. Commodus treated it as his true kingdom, the stage on which he could prove he was more than human. That obsession would consume his reign and help bring about his downfall. As his grip tightened, his mind slipped further from reality. He began equating himself with gods, first Jupiter and Mars, then finally and obsessively Hercules. This was no harmless ceremony, he genuinely believed he was divine. Court life became religious theater, senators forced to bow before him as a living god, palace slaves trained to grovel as if approaching Olympus. He wore the lion's skin, carried Hercules' club, and minted coins showing himself with divine symbols. Anyone who forgot to treat him as a deity risked exile or the sword. The madness went deeper still. He renamed every month after his own titles. September became Commodus, October Invictus, and so on. Rome itself was rechristened Colonia Commodana. The Senate had to proclaim him greater than Augustus and founder of a new golden age. Paranoia grew alongside the delusions. Every whisper sounded like conspiracy. Every slow applause felt like treason. The court became a slaughterhouse of suspicion where survival meant stroking the emperor's vanity while praying not to catch his eye. Traditional religion bent to his will, festivals rewritten to worship the living emperor, new temples ordered in the provinces, governors executed if their devotion seemed lukewarm. The old custom of deifying emperors after death was scrapped, he demanded worship now. And then came the ultimate blasphemy. Commodus fought in the Colosseum as a gladiator. Not content to watch from the imperial box, he entered the sand himself, convinced it proved his godhood and kinship with Hercules. Of course the fights were rigged, opponents armed with wooden swords or already wounded, animals drugged or starved. He killed them with real steel and basked in the forced cheers. To ordinary Romans it was obvious, their emperor was indulging the cruel daydreams of a lunatic armed with absolute power. The games themselves changed under him. Honest combat gave way to mass butchery staged purely for his amusement, hundreds of prisoners torn apart by beasts, exotic creatures imported at ruinous cost and slaughtered by the emperor's own arrow. The treasury bled dry feeding his whims, yet any advisor brave enough to mention money soon found himself next on the program. Roman citizens who once took pride in their civilization now watched their ruler behave like a savage. Faith in the entire imperial system began to crack. By 190 AD, after 10 years of escalating madness, even his inner circle understood Commodus threatened the empire's very existence. A conspiracy formed, not from high-minded republican dreams, but from raw fear for their own lives. The ringleaders were men and one woman who knew him best, Laetus, the Praetorian prefect, Eclectus, the imperial chamberlain, and, most shockingly, Marcia, his favorite mistress. All three had watched friends vanish into his dungeons. All three had recently seen their own names on his death lists. They knew only his removal could save them, and Rome. The plan was elegant at first. Marcia would poison his wine on New Year's Eve 192 AD. Death would look natural, giving them time to install a safe successor. The poison worked, Commodus grew ill and retired to his private bath to recover. But he vomited most of it up, cleared his head, and began shouting that he had been poisoned. With discovery seconds away, the conspirators panicked and activated their backup, Narcissus, a champion wrestler and gladiatorial trainer. He burst into the bath, seized the weakened emperor, and strangled him beneath the water. The self-proclaimed god died like any man, thrashing, choking, powerless. The aftermath was swift. Pertinax, a respected elder statesman, was proclaimed emperor. When the news broke, Rome erupted in relief. Statues of Commodus were torn down, his name scratched from monuments, the city's old name restored. But the damage ran too deep. The treasury was empty, the army restless, the bureaucracy rotten with fear. Pertinax lasted only 87 days before the Praetorians murdered him too. What followed was the year of the 5 emperors, civil war, auctioning of the throne, chaos. Though Septimius Severus eventually restored order, the spell was broken. From then on, the army, not tradition, would choose emperors. Commodus remains one of history's clearest lessons in how absolute power can twist even a privileged young man into a destroyer. An empire that looked invincible nearly collapsed because one unstable ruler lost all grip on reality. He thought himself immortal, yet died naked and helpless, strangled in warm bathwater by the very people who once knelt before him. No divine strength saved him. No lion's skin protected his throat. Just a pair of human hands reminding the world that power, however vast, cannot rewrite human frailty, and that when a leader forgets he is mortal, everyone pays the price.